The landmark case Griswold versus Connecticut that took place in 1965 has its roots back in the 19th century with a Connecticut statute that not only banned birth control but education on contraceptives in general. However, it was a law that wasn't really often enforced, and some Planned Parenthood employees decided to open a facility in New Haven in the early 60s. And unfortunately for them, just because a law isn't enforced doesn't mean that it isn't a law. And Estelle Griswold, who was the director of the Planned Parenthood League of Connecticut, and Celie Buxton, who was the medical director at the time, were charged with disseminating information to married couples and to the public about birth control, which was illegal. Fined $100 each, which might not sound like a lot now, but at the time it would be the equivalent of about $735 per person. The overarching issue raised in this case is one of privacy and where we stand as subject to the Constitution. What are our rights? And more specifically for this case, what are the rights of married couples and their privacy? Griswold, feeling that it was unjustified that she was being charged and that the 18th century or the statute from the 1800s was violating her 14th Amendment rights, she called for an appeal at the Supreme Court of Connecticut. Unfortunately for Griswold, the state Supreme Court decided to uphold the decision. Not to be discouraged, she decided to go all the way to the Supreme Court, which is further than two very similar cases made it, Talston versus Ullman and Poe versus Ullman, which were both cases challenging the same statute. When the case got to the Supreme Court, there were about 30 cases cited as precedents in the opinion alone, and I think the four most important are Snyder versus Massachusetts, Martin versus Struthers, Wyman versus Updegraff, and the NAACP versus Alabama. 2 and 3 sort of focus more on the freedom of speech and press and how that not only ties into your right to distribute, but your right to receive and read information, and your freedom of thought, freedom of inquiry, and freedom to teach. Now, Snyder versus Massachusetts and NAACP versus Alabama focus more on the Due Process Clause and the implications for citizens of the U.S. Now, it was probably wise of her to take the decision further to the Supreme Court because they decided 7-2 in her favor. It is cited in the opinion that specific guarantees in the Bill of Rights have penumbras formed by emanations from those guarantees that help give them life and substance. Various guarantees create zones of privacy. And that's just sort of a very flowery, ethereal way of saying that we have implied rights of privacy through the 1st, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 9th U.S. constitutional amendments, and that it takes a little bit of reading between the lines to see that we have implied privacy rights. Now, the minority opinion was not necessarily against these privacy rights, but they believed that the citizens of Connecticut should use their rights as established in the 9th and 10th Amendments to basically figure it out amongst themselves and not make it a federal issue. This case served as precedent for both civil and reproductive rights cases, and it established that we have a right to privacy in the Constitution.